Anyone outside of our big four now is next gen, so this is fun. We're just going to constantly refer to them. They'll be 35 and retiring, and we're still going to be calling them next gen players. So
yeah, Batista Agu, next gen player.
I think some of the governing bodies need to take a little bit more of a stance that's a little bit more unified, so that obviously players have a clear message. Because at the moment, there's not really a clear message about this sort of stuff.
The more competitions you have going on, the more eyes you have on it, the more money you can make. But then we have to remember that these are human beings at the end of the day, and it doesn't matter how much money you've got, you're only physically and mentally capable of doing so much in a given amount of time. Welcome back to the Getting a Grip Tennis podcast. So what's going on in the tennis world this week? We've got a roundup from Indian Wells, looking at the final on both the men's and women's side. We've obviously got the Miami Open, which has just started in the last few days, another one of the Masters 1000 events. And then we'll dip into a little bit of Barty retirement talk as well, because obviously there hasn't been enough said about that. But anyway, first place to start is Indian Wells, which finished last week now. I guess this is, we're almost a week out from that, but we're going to talk about it anyway, because it's interesting. If we start with the men's final, so obviously we had the homeboy in Taylor Fritz taking on Rafa Nadal, who's been in sensational form. This is something we have to say every podcast, obviously. Nadal was an amazing start to the year, unbeaten.
He has.
To this point.
Yes.
So, yeah, obviously Nadal had beaten Alcaraz. Merlin's prediction was sort of correct. It wasn't as easy as maybe you thought it was going to be. In very windy conditions, but he got through that, and then into the final. Myself and probably most people expected him to win that fairly easily, mainly because I'm lazy and haven't really been paying much attention to Taylor Fritz, but obviously he's been playing very well. But it was the homeboy that came out on top in straight sets, actually. But then it obviously came out afterwards that Nadal had this injury to his ribs, which gave him breathing problems, and he had to go to hospital and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, what's your kind of reaction to that final? Have you been following Fritz much recently? How did you kind of react to that final and how it played out?
Yeah, interesting bit of tennis, really. I think it's a bit of a shock. It's a shock to people who regularly, sort of watch the tour and see these matches played out. Like, for example, Rafael Nadal, you wouldn't expect him to lose in a final such as Indian Wells. None of us would have, to be quite honest. I think, if anyone was going to take it from him, it was going to be Alcaraz. And I think it came out as well that he was struggling with breathing slightly in that match as well, I think. So I think it was something that was, sort of beginning throughout the later stages of a tournament, and obviously in the final it really affected him. So I think what you're saying there is maybe my prediction would have been right in a world of completely fit people. That's what I'm going to take from that. But apart from that, with Taylor Fritz, I think he's been playing quite well. I'm like you. I haven't really followed him too much. I know him as one of these next gen players. He's coming through. He's starting to look really strong. But sometimes I don't know. Consistent performances across the tour are something that a lot of people do struggle with. More a case on the women's tour than it is on the men's tour, where that consistency can be harder to find sometimes. But yeah, like I say, once you look outside of the top 10, that consistency is harder to find. To be honest, we're starting to see it with these next-gen players that are at the top anyway. So, for example, Thiem, where is he now? Exactly.
Yeah, I thought, he was going to be like the next big thing when he was coming through.
Exactly.
And then, I think, obviously he won that US Open. During the pandemic, wasn't it? It was when there was no crowds or anything. And then we thought, he should kick on from here. Then I think he had, maybe a few injury issues and things like that. But yeah, in terms of Fritz, he's actually younger than I thought he was, maybe just because of his stature. Yeah. I think he's only like 24 years old. So I suppose you could still class him as one of these next generation players. But I think
it's that boundary now, isn't it?
Yeah, like where do you draw the line? Because Alcaraz is like 18, so where are we drawing this boundary? I don't know.
Anyone outside of our big four now is next gen, so this is fun. We're just going to constantly refer to them. They'll be 35 and retiring, and we're still going to be calling them next gen players. So. Yeah,
Batista Agu, next gen player.
Yep.
But yeah, I think the thing that from the limited amount of time I've watched Fritz, the thing that impresses me is just how well he moves for someone of that size. He's obviously quite a slender build, but he's like very flexible for someone of that size. And obviously, when you've got that height, you've already pretty much got the serve in the bag. Like you're you're going to get a lot of free points off the serve. But as we know, that's not enough at the very top level, especially against guys who return as well as Rafa and Novak. So you've got to have a lot more to your game, and that's what impresses me the most is his baseline game, really, for someone he's so tall. I think this is like a new trend that we're seeing amongst these taller players, is just how well they can move. Because I think Berrettini's another example. He's a pretty big fella, and as we saw at Wimbledon, like obviously he did lose that final to Djokovic, but he was going almost toe to toe with him, or at times he was from the baseline. So yeah, I think just through better training, these guys now, even if you're like 6'4" plus or whatever, you used to just have a serve and maybe a bit of a forehand and nothing else. Now these guys have got more of a well-rounded game, which is Go on.
I think we've looked through history. You know, you take the Isner and the Anderson types, the Ivo Karlovic's of the world, Milos Raonic as well. Like these people have they've had success elude them on the tour, sort of haunt them their whole careers, where they can get so far, but they can't string together consistent results, unless it's based on that serve game. And as you say, they'll get a lot of free points off of it, and there's a lot of people they could beat doing that. But unfortunately, there are some people trained to defeat that. Murray was one of the prime examples at the height of his career, being one of the best returners in the world. Djokovic also being one of those people.
You've got to bring Murray back into it, haven't you? You little fanboy.
Well, he was one of the best returners in the world.
No, he was, yeah.
But the point being as well that I think a lot of these players now are understanding how a taller person can move and move more efficiently. I think that's definitely a big thing. But I must say it also helps that courts are beginning to slow down. So you're seeing this a lot throughout the tour, and this is something we can talk about in the future, and the technical aspects that we have in tennis. But with slower courts, these taller guys are going to get to more, and it's going to make them look like they're going more toe to toe with those who are better movers.
Yeah, I think the bounce also comes into that. I think the bounce on these courts generally is a little bit higher than the kind of low skiddy nature of surfaces back in like 90s, even the noughties. So yeah, that does kind of bring them into play a bit more. Okay, so that's on the men's side. Let's talk a little bit about the women's side of things. So obviously we had Iga Swiatek, I think that's how you pronounce it, even though when you read it, it literally doesn't look anything like that. But who am I to say how you pronounce a Polish name? Ben. It is, yes. God, my Anglophileness is coming through very much there. So yeah, Iga Swiatek, amazing, really. She is only 20 years old, so we could class her as next generation. Won the 2020 French Open, and she's been pushing at the top level for a couple years now. And she won that final against, the name escapes me, I think it was Sakkari, possibly, at Indian Wells, through like very windy conditions. Which I'm sure like we can relate to. There was like a time, when was it, like last summer, where we were playing in ridiculous conditions. We had like this kind of collection of terraced houses like all the way around. A bit like, I suppose the stadium could have a similar effect, where you've got wind like basically swirling around in all directions. Yeah. It just, oh god, it made us look like absolute tits. It was
this horrible. Is the funny thing, you forget how badly you're going to be able to move sometimes. Like the wind is one of those things where obviously footwork is the most important aspect. You've got to make tiny adjustments all the time, depending on how the ball bounces or swerves in the air, for example. I honestly think that if you can beat someone in windy conditions, then you've got a very good handle on rhythm, and you've got a very good ability to return to rhythm every time you lose it, because there's no doubt that in a windy conditions you're going to lose your rhythm here and there. But yeah, I think that's one of the most impressive things about this, is that for a young player, she's managed to find that it's got to be a mental attitude specifically that can handle those sorts of conditions, because it's very easy to give up. I mean, I know at that level as well, especially at the top level of tennis, they're not going to be so inclined to give up. Money, glory, all of that stuff on the line, and whatnot. It's their livelihood. But at the same time, it's harder to overcome various adversities throughout a match if you've got that breathing down your neck, quite literally.
Yeah, I think it's in terms when you're faced with windy conditions, I think it's okay if it's consistent. Like if it's coming from one end of the court, you can adjust to that, because you can, like, obviously if you're hitting against the wind, you can go for it a bit more. And obviously, if you're hitting with the wind, you obviously need to play with a bit more margin for error, a bit more spin. But when it's either coming from like the side, which I think it was in her match and in the Nadal Alcaraz match, it becomes so difficult, and like your footwork is just like heightened to another level. Your ability to basically, you've got to wait until the very last second to like plant your feet, because otherwise you might just miss the ball completely. And even the top players struggled with it at times. You saw like Nadal missing a few shots that you would normally make. Shows we're all human and how difficult it is.
Well, that's it. Like a lot of tennis, you're trained to anticipate ball. You're trained to set early, so that you can then make an impact with the shot. Hit something with a little bit more aggression or spin or whatever you're choosing to do in that moment. But yeah, that's exactly it. Like you have to wait longer. You have to fight some of the training instinct that you have, and you have to go back to. It does bring in talent, I suppose, but like I say, I stick by the fact that it's about constantly refinding that rhythm.
Yeah, I think, like you said, it does. In terms of concentration and mentality, that comes to the fore even more. Like you said, obviously to not get flustered by the conditions, but also you have to focus that bit more on every shot that you play, which can be very tiring. But that's where that resilience and kind of mental endurance comes in. Obviously, right now we're straight into another big ATP Masters 1000 event, or WTA 1000 event as well. We're at Miami Open this time. Welcome to Miami.
Oh, don't.
I love that song. Well, that was a terrible rendition. Will Smith would be turning in his... Well, he's not dead, but he would be turning in his grave.
Wow.
So yeah, we've got there's loads going on. There's so many different matches. Where do we begin? We've got Kyrgios absolutely smacking the ball about going into God mode, in the words of Tennis TV. We had the all British matchup, Norrie against Draper, and then obviously Andy Murray is still kind of trying to fight his way back to the top week by week. Back with Lendl now, and he's up against Medvedev actually later today. I think at the time of recording
this, 4 o'clock.
Should be an interesting matchup. Do you want to talk about that one first? How Murray is going to match up against Medvedev?
You want me to talk about Murray? Oh, that's a shock. I'd never expect that.
I know, I should love that.
Yeah, of course. So I think it's going to be an interesting match. Certainly one that's worth watching if you can, or at least following. My instinct is saying, obviously, that Medvedev will win. He's not been on the greatest form of late, and obviously, there are many issues as to why that's the case, political and whatnot, aside. But yeah, Andy Murray particularly is one of these people you can't ever write off. So it's early into this tournament. Andy will have had a bit of rest. He's probably going to be feeling, I'm hoping, a lot fitter and ready to go. Now with some new tactics with Ivan Lendl, and Lendl's obviously got a lot of experience against these players already, having coached Zverev, obviously recently and up till now. But like I said, I think this is going to be an interesting match. And if anyone's going to take it to a place that's a bit of an upset, then Murray's the man that can do it.
Yeah, I think they've only played once before. I believe it was 2 or 3 years ago, and Medvedev won that in 2 sets. I think the first set was pretty close. But yeah, I think Murray is really striving for just a consistent run in any of these tournaments. And any kind of boost of confidence he can get, he'll obviously take. And if he manages to scout Medvedev, then that'll be a massive plus for him and give him maybe a bit more belief going into perhaps Wimbledon later in the year, that he can still compete with these guys. I think he does, like, Murray is a supreme competitor. He does believe that he can still compete with these top guys. It's just
he can
getting that run together, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's just getting a consistent run in one of these tournaments, and that honing that match practice, because if you keep going out in like the first few rounds, you can never really hone that kind of match craft specifically. You're always kind of fighting, for like we always talk about rhythm, but he's always kind of fighting for a bit of rhythm within these tournaments. So I mean, I would not, never write Murray off. Obviously, I would expect Medvedev to win, but who knows where his head is at the moment with everything that's going on with regards to Russia. So I think it may be a closer match than most people think for that one. We've obviously got Kyrgios. I don't know did you see that Kyrgios match or the highlights?
I saw some highlights. Yeah.
Absolutely smashing the ball. Even did a little tweener, of course, because he has to.
Oh, of course. Yeah.
Striking the ball so cleanly. We know he's capable of like hitting the ball that cleanly and with that much power, but it's just seeing it come together in one match or across a tournament, in fact, is something that I really want to see, because he's got so much talent, and we've been saying it for years and years and years, and it's just like it just needs to realise it in like a big tournament, show everyone.
I'll tell you what, it was partially why I was excited when, obviously some social media stuff came out that he and Murray were getting on as good friends at one point. So, yes, I'm relating something back to Murray, of course. But the point being is, in my head, if you take Kyrgios's raw talent and that ability for tennis, and then you take Murray's hard work, determination attitude, if you were to merge those together, that's an unstoppable world number one in perfect craft. Like he can already hit all the shots. We know he can, and the only difference for Kyrgios is the mental attitude in each matches, and how much he's feeling it. We can't tell him how to play better tennis, with which he's actually criticised a fan in front of the stadium. I don't know if you've seen the video. Very funny. But this is the point. Like he knows what he can do. I think just like I say, he just needs that push. And if he plays like that, then absolutely, he'll wash the tour out.
Yeah, it's a hard one, isn't it? No one's inside his head, so you don't really know what he's thinking. But he is very much a free spirit. So I just don't know if he's ever going to have that mental discipline, for want of a better word, that Murray, etc., have got. So
if not, I'm not worried. It's great entertainment, and it's just good to see him play.
Yeah, it is. Like, at least hopefully he stays on the tour for as long as possible, because as much as tennis is just about, it's a sport between, well, in this case, two individuals, it is an entertainment business as well, as we've said many a time. So the more we can have these kind of guys, him, like Monfils as well, these kind of players, it all kind of just adds to the theatre of it. Yes, another thing that does maybe add to the theatre, but not in the right way, is players throw their rackets against the ground. Now, we did have a little debate about this a couple of weeks ago. I'm going to have to retract part of what I said, where I said it's fine for players to throw their rackets against the ground if it's like close to them. Now that I've seen what can happen when thrown incorrectly, I don't think that's a good idea. I did see a little video from Roddick, actually. He was showing people what the correct way is to throw your racket on the ground or hit the ball, and it was like you got to throw it like face down so that it doesn't ping everywhere. But it's like, maybe just don't throw it on the ground at all. That would probably be easier.
That would be better. Yeah, that would be a lot better. I don't know. Jensen Brooksby, again, he's a victim of the emotion of the tennis tour, the emotion of these high-profile matches and whatnot. I think what strikes me about this, and we already know my opinion, I'm a little bit more hard stance on this sort of stuff, because you're trying to win fans. That's not going to win you fans, especially the way it ended up for him. But it does strike me that, for example, Novak Djokovic, he got disqualified from the US Open when he hit a ball really hard and it hit a line umpire. How is this much different? In my opinion, I don't understand how this is much different. So, in many retrospects, I think some of the governing bodies need to take a little bit more of a stance that's a little bit more unified, so that obviously players have a clear message, because at the moment there's not really a clear message about this sort of stuff, because I think the world of tennis is very accepting of the fact that yes, it's a singles match and therefore you're one brain on the court. There's going to be emotional ups and downs, so you can have a little fit every now and then. That's fine, but we need to work out where those lines are. So I think that's the main lesson here.
Yeah, a few pundits have said a similar thing. I think the more you see the repercussions of throwing a racket on the ground and how it can literally just ping off anywhere, I think that excuse starts to wear thin, because you know that that's a possibility. Even if you're like, oh, I only just threw it down by my feet, you've now seen many times where that's gone and hit someone or nearly hit someone, so there's a clear risk there. And yeah, you're right. I agree in terms of the ATP, WTA, etc., needing to come down harder on this, because I think in Jensen's case, he may have got like deducted a point or whatever, but he should have been disqualified. Really, it happened twice as well during the match.
Yeah, this is it. I would say it's a repeating occurrence, and technically umpires as well need to have a better handle on it. So if it's a repeating occurrence, then that is grounds for disqualification. So I'm a bit surprised that he wasn't.
Yeah, like fines are not going to do much in this instance. It has to be actual ramifications in the match of your actual
for sure,
in terms of the result. So yeah, I think they will in time come to that conclusion, and they will come down hard on it, because it seems to be slipping away a little bit in recent years. Let's talk about a certain Mrs. Ashleigh Barty. She is shockingly decided to retire from tennis at just the age of 25, saying that she wants to chase other dreams, and she's absolutely spent, and that even after winning Wimbledon, she wasn't quite fulfilled. Yeah, it's come as a shock to a lot of the outside world, but I think her inner circle, her coaches were sort of expecting this to happen at some point relatively soon. She's mentioned it before to them. I don't know what you make of it, and obviously it goes in contrast to, I suppose, what we've come to consider success on the tennis tour, given the big three or four, what they've done in the last 20 years, and how they've just consistently maintained that incredible level. Now we've got someone who is clearly one of the best, if not the best, women's tennis player of recent times, retiring at maybe even before her peak or at her peak, which is just a completely unusual thing, hence the shock headlines.
And again, it's that unusual aspect that makes you question everything about tennis, I suppose. So I know that on the female tour, obviously it's a lot more or at least it's a lot less certain who's going to win each tournament, so there's a lot more uncertainty surrounding everything that occurs. So again, like I say, you've seen Barty be so successful, yes, but at the same time, like through the tour, how does that compare to the men's tour, where obviously you can have Djokovic winning X, Y, and Z number of tournaments a year, and then there's just a few extras that he's not playing that the other people can pick up, So, you've got these scenarios in women's tennis that it makes it harder. It makes it a harder place to survive. I'm not going to talk too much about that because I have no experience. Nor am I female, so therefore, it would be wrong for me to make too many comments. But I think that it's just her listening to her own self, and all credit to that, because if she doesn't feel like it's going to fulfill her anymore, then she's not going to enjoy it and put on her best performances. And it's quite possible. People change careers all the time in life. Maybe she just realised that she didn't want to. We've got to remember that being a professional tennis star is a career in itself that may lead to more tennis things in the future, but not everyone wants to stay there forever.
Yeah, and she's previously had a couple of stints out of tennis for like a year and a half. She went and played in the Women's Big Bash, which is the T20 cricket competition over in Australia. I think she played in a golf championship or something to like a pretty high level. She's clearly, she's one of those people with the good genetics who can pick up things quickly. Although I don't really like people describing it like that. But yeah, she obviously has got other interests in various other sporting arenas, and also the other thing she alluded to is just wanting to be at home with her family more. We've seen it in previous press conferences. There was one time where she brought out I think it was her niece or something, into a press conference, and she was basically saying like, this is what matters, this is what makes me happy. And as we've touched upon before, these tennis players are traveling all around the world almost all year, and I think it's quite easy to forget that, because people think, oh yeah, you've got a great life traveling around to all these different places, but you're likely going to be away from your family for like a long period of time, and
seeing hotel rooms and tennis courts alone.
Yeah, literally, especially like when we were more into the pandemic, where it was, very strict in terms of like who you could bring with you and how often you could, or where you could go outside of your hotel, things like that. So it does take its toll, and obviously some people will feel that more than others. People have different priorities, and she's seen this as the right time to go and spend more time with their family. So I just think all power to it. Everyone's got different ideas of what success or just happiness in general is in life. So
yes, it's a big difference between the women's and the men's tours for sure, because like the constant conversation in the men's tours is who's the GOAT, who's the GOAT, who's the GOAT. But at the same time, and by GOAT, just so that everyone knows, I mean the greatest of all time.
I'm sure
just in case anyone's... Well, I'd hope so.
Unless it's like a 3-year-old listening or something.
But obviously with the women's tour, that's less of a thing because it's less consistent. So success is viewed differently. But yeah, no, like I say, it's sad to see her go for the entertainment aspect, but yeah, obviously it's her decision and only right for her. Yeah,
I also think this is probably something we can talk about another time, but just in general, the tennis schedule and how crazy it is. It's not just unique to tennis either. This is like something I see in cricket and football, because obviously the more competitions you have going on, the more eyes you have on it, the more money you can make. But then we have to remember that these are human beings at the end of the day, and it doesn't matter how much money you've got, you're only physically and mentally capable of doing so much in a given amount of time. But yeah, I think that's something we can probably touch upon in a future episode, the schedules in modern sport in general.
Well, insane, aren't they? People give so much of their time.
Okay, time for another round of tennis trivia. I think we're on round 4 now. Merlin obviously set a new benchmark last week with a lofty 3 out of 5.
3 out of 5.
Not sure I'm going to be able to beat that, but I give it my best shot. I think multiple choice is going to give me a little bit more of a chance, although that probably means the questions are more difficult. So,
well, here we have it. You could reach the heights of 3 out of 5, the over 50% consistency that we look for. I still wouldn't be happy if that was my serve percentage, but it's an improvement on the first week.
It's a 2-1, isn't it, in university terms?
Yeah, exactly. Anyway, let's go with question 1, shall we? So we've talked a lot about the big 3 and the big 4 in the past few weeks. Obviously, it's a big 4, in case anyone is doubting my opinions on the subject. But before the reign of the big 4, tennis was a very different world, a much more inconsistent world. So in 2002, which incidentally was the last winner of Wimbledon that reigned outside of the top 4 up until today, who was that winner? Who was the 2002 Wimbledon winner?
For the men's singles.
For the men's singles that was outside of the top 4. So your options are Pete Sampras, Goran Ivanisevic, Leighton Hewitt, and David Nalbandian.
Oh, that has definitely helped me out because I was struggling for a name, and I think yes.
So this is the last person to win Wimbledon before the top 4 started taking control of that tournament forevermore.
Yeah, I think it might be a little bit late for Goran. I think his was closer to like 2000, 2001. Who else did you say, sorry?
Pete Sampras, David Nalbandian, and Leighton Hewitt.
Yeah, I think maybe slightly late for Sampras as well. I'm not sure Nalbandian won Wimbledon. He might have won another Grand Slam. I'm going to go with Leighton Hewitt.
Correct. Well done. So Leighton Hewitt, before the reign of a slightly more unstoppable Andy Murray, was my favourite player on the tour. He was the first player that I started to follow and support because he was outside of sort of the bulk of the early players. Everyone supported Federer, so I was like, oh, I don't know if I want to get into this camp straight away. And I really enjoyed the way Leighton Hewitt played, which really
Baseline
makes for an
grinder.
interesting, exactly. And this is my style. But nonetheless, he was a showman. He had some emotion. Like I say, maybe he was a culprit of some of these anger outbursts in the past as well. But no, he was definitely an entertainer. Very well done. So that's 1 out of 5. So number two, question number 2. Even Lendl is now back with Andy Murray after great previous successes. My question is now about Lendl. How many major titles has Ivan Lendl won with his coachees? So these are the people that he has coached on the ATP Tour. These are major titles, which include Grand Slams, Olympics, and the ATP Tour finals. Your answers are 5, 6, 7, or 11.
Oh, got to do the maths now. Which, as a maths teacher, I should be well.
You should be okay with that.
Used to, but I'm often,
I really hope so.
Often mental maths is a bit of a struggle, especially under such high pressure. Obviously, with Murray, so that would have been 2013 Wimbledon, 2016 Wimbledon, 2012 Was he with him in 2012 Olympics? Definitely the 2016 Olympics. Then, who else did he coach? Zverev. I don't know. Did Zverev win the Olympics? I don't know if he was coaching him at that time. This is tough. What were the numbers again? Was it 5, 6?
5, 6, 7, and 11.
I'm going to go with... I'll just go down the middle. 7.
7 is correct. Well done.
Yeah, definitely wasn't a guess.
So what we're talking about here is obviously the titles won were Andy Murray's 3 Grand Slams, his ATP Tour finals, and his 2 Olympics, and Alexander Zverev's ATP Tour finals. And that's what we saw.
Oh, I forgot about Murray's US Open. Jeez.
Yeah, when you didn't mention his US Open, I thought, Murray didn't win anything major, at least when we're talking about these different titles, until Lendl was on the scene. Okay, so 2 out of 5. 2 out of 5, you got 100% so far. You're feeling confident?
Well, I mean, I did just guess the last one, but yes.
You did just guess the last one, but that guess worked out. This is the joy of multiple choice.
Educated guess.
Educated guess.
If there is such a thing.
Yes. So you might be in luck here, because I thought that was a harder question. But nonetheless, it is multiple choice for all the questions. Number 3. Who holds the title for most matches won in a single Grand Slam tournament? Now, your answers here are Roger Federer, Juan Martín del Potro, Rafael Nadal, or Jimmy Connors.
Most matches won at a single Grand Slam.
Most matches won in a single Grand Slam tournament.
So I'm not sure if this is...
And it's shockingly close between the top few.
Yeah, I think you'd be inclined to just straight up say Nadal, obviously because of all the French Open wins. But then when you're talking about just wins in general, then you've got to think of their longevity. So obviously Federer's won 8 Wimbledons, hasn't he? But he even in the ones he hasn't won, a lot of times he's got to the latter stages.
He's made some deep runs. Yeah.
So Jimmy Connors as well. I can't remember which slam it was, but I'm sure he's won a lot at one major. Ooh, I'm gonna go with. I'll go with Federer just because I think Nadal's the obvious answer, but I'm definitely not confident.
Well, you're right to not be confident because get a grip. I enjoyed how you didn't even have a look in Juan Martín del Potro. my little red herring in there, you just immediately went, nah, he's not won enough. Has won a Grand Slam though. Nonetheless, your answer was actually Rafael Nadal.
Okay,
and it was for the obvious reasons. So it's that unstoppable winning of the French Open. There's extra semis, there's extra finals. They make the difference, and obviously his longevity. He builds his life around playing at the French Open.
That is crazy though, because he's still like 4 years younger than Federer. So
do you want to know how many matches he's won?
Go on then.
105. Anyway, Question number 4. What I want to know now is which female player holds the record for the longest time spent at world number 1? Your possible contenders are Serena Williams, Steffi Graf, Martina Navratilova, and Martina Hingis.
What is it? Most weeks at number 1, did you say?
Yeah, the longest time spent at the world number 1.
So it's not like a consecutive run, it's just in total?
Yes.
Okay. Glad we've cleared that up, because that's clearly going to make a difference to what I go with, because I have all the information at hand. Obviously, Navratilova and Hingis, that is slightly before my time, but Serena Williams or Steffi Graf? I'll go with the one that I know. I'll go with Serena Williams. But again, I'm really not sure.
Get a grip. Unfortunately, the answer is Steffi Graf with a very impressive 377 weeks. So, very unfortunate there. Serena Williams has got a long run at the top, but not quite as long.
Yeah, I think Serena may have the longest consecutive run. I'm not sure. I know, like,
I believe that is correct.
Barty was like on course to get close to that, obviously before she retired. But yeah, interesting.
But no, very interesting. Okay, so how are we feeling now in terms of confidence?
Oh, it's on the floor. I've got to get this one to just tie with your last week's score. So pressure's on.
This is very much the question. You need to get this answer correct in order to tie with my score last week. But it is a doozy of a question. So, question number 5. In 2005, how many female Grand Slam champions were not competing on the tour?
Wait,
and your answers are 0, 1, 3, and 4. So think about it this way. You've got 4 Grand Slams, and that means you've got 4 winners in a year of those Grand Slams. How many of those 4 players were not competing on the tour?
I'm still confused by the phrasing of the question.
So quite simply, you can enter a Grand Slam tournament whilst being a wild card or getting through qualifier rounds. So you might not enter the main draw because of your ranking. And your ranking is only available if you are playing regularly on the tour. So, for example, if Rafael Nadal decides that he just wants to play Roland Garros, even if he didn't have a ranking, because he's such a champion, they might go, yeah, you can have a wild card to that tournament. He might not play another match at another tournament all year. No Masters, no Challenger events.
You're talking about players who weren't seeded winning these Grand Slams?
Not only not seeded, they weren't playing on the tour.
Blimey. And then the options were?
Basically to qualify to entry to these tournaments. So the numbers are 0, 1, 3, and 4.
0, 1, 3, and 4. Is that correct?
Yeah.
I mean, the way you've said the question makes me think it's towards the higher end. That might just be your acting background coming in there, trying to psych me out. Oh, I mean, there's no way I can make an educated guess or anything because I have nothing to go off. But obviously,
it's pretty random here. You've got 4 possibilities. You've got 25% chance.
These questions are brutal this week. God. Should have known that when they became multiple choice, they were going to step up.
They
in
have to be
difficulty.
harder. They have to be harder. I've got to protect my lead.
Okay. I'll lean towards the higher end. I'll go with 3 because 3 is a magic number after all.
So going with the third answer again on a question you don't know the answer to has in fact given you the correct answer. Well done.
Come on.
So the answer is 3 of the 4 Grand Slam champions on the women's tour in 2005 were not actually playing on the women's tour in 2005. So the fun thing about this answer is both Serena and Venus Williams both didn't have enough points to qualify for the tour. And the French Open champion was also ill throughout that year after having won the French Open. So, that's one of the main differences. But like I say, that's 3 players of the women's tour who obviously weren't playing regular tennis, but obviously picked up Grand Slams, which I think is a very good highlight of the inconsistency of the tour and the fact that it's anybody's game.
Well, yeah, and I suppose you could say that makes it more interesting. Some people prefer to just have, your reliable champions
Exactly.
or whatever. You just know pretty much who's going to be in like the last 4. But it's good, a little bit of variety spices it up a bit.
Indeed.
Well, I've learnt something new today, again.
And well done to you. You've matched my score 3 out of 5.
We're heading in the right direction, I think. When we get towards like 3 or 4 most weeks, I think that's about right. All right, that wraps it up for this week's podcast. Thank you very much for listening. Either, I guess through Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or if you're watching on YouTube, please, if you can, like the video, subscribe, share it around if you feel so inclined to do so, and we'll see you again next week.